joined today by Daniel Beswick from the Emerging Cricket Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that we are very still, and that's for a little bit of a technical issue that we've had today. But you've got our audio, which hopefully is the more important part. How are you going, Daniel?
I'm good. Yeah, definitely keen to emphasise that the audio is the most important part. Even though I did shave for this, Paul, so unfortunately we can't show our beautiful faces to the world. But there's plenty of cricket to talk about, and that's ultimately what's more important.
Certainly is. To begin with, a question off the top, just without notice. The last night, Australian time, there were 6 different games of T20 cricket. Now, 4 of them were warm-up games, and 2 of them were actual real games in those Group A and Group B. As a fan of emerging cricket, do you find it a bit offensive that the warm-up games were scheduled to clash with the real thing?
I'm not a huge fan of it at all, Paul. And before I go into a deep tangent as to why I don't like it so much, I can't understand the thinking behind it. I mean, this is a global tournament, and you would think in terms of ICC metrics, in terms of everything that wants to be achieved on that front, you would want to ensure that all of these games are played at a time when you can watch them all. I don't understand. I understand from an IPL point of view why all of these matches have been squashed in, but to me, it completely takes away from the purity of the tournament. And the purity of the tournament is qualifying teams playing in the first round of a World Cup, because that's what it's called, the first round. It's not a qualifier, although it might be a pseudo qualifier in effect. Yeah, I can't say I'm too happy about it. Warm-up matches are warm-up matches. You get 15 players, trundling, rolling their arms over it and batting. I don't really take a lot out of them in general. And yeah, there's a World Cup on at the moment. I would much prefer to watch matches that actually bear some sort of significance in the, complete outlook of the competition. I
agree, and it's only kind of dawned on me now. I'm part of the problem as well. I stayed up all night watching 2 warm-up matches when I could have been watching the Sri Lanka Namibia game. And you're 100% right. That's what World Cups are for. You've got to get the big games and the not so big games. Often those are the ones that end up being the exciting games. And look at Bangladesh versus Scotland on the first night. That was a game that should have had a massive audience. And yeah, they could. I understand with the tight schedule, but surely they could have found a way to maybe play all of the warm-up games at a certain time slot and make sure that all of the real games were on unopposed. But we'll dive into the tournament pretty quickly. Just a quick couple of non-World Cup headlines, just for all those who couldn't stand Jarvo during the winter, where he got arrested, ran onto the ground 3 separate times. He's also done it now in the NFL. They've got an NFL game on in London, and he popped onto the ground in full NFL regalia. So this story continues. I know some people hate me mentioning it because they can't stand him, but I find him still a little bit funny, even though can't condone what he does. In a massive world of cricket, there's a double header of WBBL today. Stars against the Hurricanes and Heat against the Scorchers. Sheffield Shield. South Australia and Queensland did end up playing out a draw. South Australia only got 79 runs short, and they were 6 wickets down. So probably a bit before your time, Daniel, but for the 1920s, they used to play on the 5th morning if there was a possibility of a result. So if we could go back 100 years, we'd have a very exciting result there. In the Tasmania Western Australia Shield game at Stumpson Day 2, Tasmania had made it 252 in response to WA's 238, and WA were 1 for 42 in their second innings. Jai Richardson, after bowling just 2 overs, taking a wicket, and he'd been out of the Shield season for 2 years, came off with back spasms, so that's a bit of a concern. He may or may not take part in the rest of the match. And finally, England's going to visit the West Indies on 2 tours next year, or they're calling it a split tour. They're going to play 5 T20s in January and then 3 test matches in March. It's kind of a thank you for them touring there during the pandemic. Now, let's get to the World Cup and to the aforementioned match that I disrespected by not watching. I tried at one point. I did bring up the third screen, and it felt eerily because there was 3 consecutive slog sweeps that went for 4 on all 3 screens at once, and I thought, this is going to do my head in. It's too much. I turned it off. So, Daniel, what did you think of the Sri Lanka-Namibia match?
Look, I'm going to be honest, and without trying to sound too much like an emerging cricket nation apologist, I actually thought the scoreboard didn't quite reflect the match that unfolded. Watched up until about 3 a.m. here local time live, and then caught up with the rest of it, the final sort of 10 overs or so at the back end this morning. And you could see the adjustments that Namibia were trying to make on the fly between Stephen Bart and Zane Green opening the batting. Zane Green's actually been pushed up into that opening role. I don't think necessarily by choice, because it's a spot that JP Kotzer had before JP Kotzer gave the game away. So it's a new role for Zane Green, and he's performed well in the lead up through a lot of practice matches. But yeah, if you did see the stats that came up on the screen, his T20 international record doesn't paint a pretty picture, put it that way. Stephen Bard played a couple of really nice shots at the top of the order. You could tell that he was just adjusting to that extra 5-10 kilometers per hour speed upping from the likes of the Sri Lanka quick bowlers. So I thought we were outstanding, actually. Plenty of movement, particularly from Karunaratne early to move the ball away from the right-hander. And then Craig Williams and Gerard Erasmus in the middle order did look somewhat comfortable. They just couldn't really up the gear to the next gear when they wanted to move from, say, overs 10 to 13. And then David Visa and JJ Smith, one of the new tactics that Namibia will have at the moment is having to work out who they're actually going to send first out to bat in that situation, because it had been JJ Smith's role for a long time, and now David Visa has been put into this team to fit. And yeah, it was a tricky one. JJ was probably not given enough time at the back end there. He couldn't muster a boundary in his innings of 12 or 15, and they sort of limped to 96. They were a little bit unlucky, but Wininda Hasaranga and Tiaksana were excellent, and definitely something that they'll have to adjust to. A bit of a baptism of fire playing Sri Lanka first up at night under lights in Abu Dhabi. If this match was a day game in Oman, I would have given Namibia more of a chance. But in reply, Namibia, I thought, bowled really well to start off with. We know Sri Lanka's top order are a little bit flimsy. JJ Smith bowled well. Bernard Scholz with his left arm orthodox looked class. But eventually, the class of Avishka Fernando and Rajapaksa ultimately shone through there. Pretty comfortable victory and not a great net run rate result there for Namibia. But look, if I was Namibia, it would be heartening to know that I don't think Ireland and the Netherlands, I don't think either of those sides played particularly at their best in the other game, which we'll probably talk about in a couple of moments too, Paul.
Yeah, so that actually was when I was watching that Namibia had reduced Sri Lanka to 3 for 26, and I thought, oh, this could be an interesting game. But yeah, in chasing that 96 down, they didn't lose another wicket. In the other game that you mentioned, Netherlands 106 all out, Ireland's victory 3 for 107, so 29 balls remaining, a 7-wicket victory. So they're a pretty impressive side, Ireland.
They can be when they get it right. And I'll start with Ireland. Curtis Kemp taking 4 wickets in 4 balls. And, those 4 wickets were a middle order that is rather strong in the associate world in the Netherlands. I did think, though, that he was perhaps a little bit fortunate in the 4 wickets that he took. And that's not trying to sound bitter, because I don't particularly like bowlers, but it was an interesting 4 in 4. Colin Ackerman was caught behind upon review with the ball touching a glove, a slow ball bouncer. And then Ryan Tendusgarda fell over trying to play one through the onside. It might have nipped back a little bit, but to be honest, it was one that you'd think Tendo would put away, shelling peas almost. And the same with Scott Edwards in the next dismissal. He was also given out LBW upon review. It was given not out on field. It was overturned. And yeah, the bowler and keeper were vehement in all of that. And then Van der Merwe played an awful shot, really, after you just, lost 3 wickets in 3 balls. So I think the Netherlands will be really disappointed first and foremost. And looking at that team, I was a little bit surprised that Stefan Myburgh didn't get the nod ahead of Bas de Leede, who batted at 3. He's been considered a bit of a golden child of Dutch cricket. His dad played for the Netherlands as well. Ryan Campbell's got high hopes for him, but I thought personally the experience of Stefan Myburgh, who's played at multiple T20 World Cups, would have probably been a better fit here. But to bring it back to Ireland, it was a strange one for me, because I don't think they were particularly incredible at what they did in terms of the bowling plans. There was a run out as well to sort of begin the rot. Ben Cooper having to walk after he basically ran himself out with a mix-up with Max O'Dowd. O'Dowd batted pretty well, in fairness, but I look outside of Mark Adair, who I thought was probably the pick of the bowlers, and I know that's going to be strange when someone's just taken 4 wickets in 4 balls. I thought Mark Adair was quite good. Paul Sterling snuck an over in with his right arm off spin at the start. Josh Little was good, and I'm intrigued by Ben White and Simi Singh as a spin combination, and that could really be the secret weapon for Ireland coming through this tournament if they are to progress and give the Super 12 phase a real shake. Ben White is rather unknown even in emerging circles. He's almost in this new age leg spin type of role. He also sort of bowls carom balls out of the front of the hand. He's an intriguing prospect, and Simi Singh is a wily veteran. So the more I talk about it, the more I think about it, from the bowling side, I think it's encouraging that someone like Curtis Campher, who's only really a second or third change bowler for Ireland, has put in a performance like this. I think the likes of Andrew Balbirnie and Paul Sterling, who are running this team, will be really up and about with that result.
Okay, now moving on to the warm-up games, Australia against New Zealand. Australia ultimately won this game, but there was a retirement. Daryl Mitchell retired on 33 from 22, so you don't want to read too much into it, but I think both sides had a pretty decent hit out. New Zealand made 7 for 158. Guptill got runs. Kane Williamson looked pretty good. Jimmy Neesham looked excellent, scored 31 from 18. For Australia with the ball, Mitchell Starc looked quite good. Kane Richardson looked excellent, as did Adam Zampa. The big concerns were Ashton Agar. 1 for 34 probably flattered him. He got one cheap over where the new batsman really didn't play too many aggressive shots. And Mitchell Marsh, none for 53. So if they'd been hoping he was going to fill that all-rounder spot, well, he may well still make the side, obviously, as a specialist batter, but they'll be a bit reluctant to give him too many overs after he got pasted all around. The Australian innings was very intriguing. David Warner, golden duck, advancing and swiping at a ball. Finch and Marsh batted very aggressively, and then Smith and Stoinis then sort of came in and played more sensibly and looked like they were going to take the game to a win for Australia. I remember at the time watching, thinking, this is the right thing for them to do if this was a real match. But given it's not a real match, you'd almost say they should be swiping and playing the way that we want them to play in the actual World Cup proper, in terms of really ultra aggressive play. But a few more wickets fell, and Wade got an unimpressive golden duck and almost looked like New Zealand were going to win. But in the end, Australia did sneak over the line. Inglis came in right at the end, hit consecutive boundaries. It's clear that because he batted so low that he's not probably going to be in Australia's first choice 11. I'd have him in there straight away instead of Matthew Wade. And in the other sort of high-profile warm-up game, England 188, Bairstow, Ali and Livingston smashed the ball everywhere. Bhuvi Kumar looked pretty ordinary. Ravi Ashwin looked excellent, as did Bumrah. And in reply, KL Rahul played an beautiful innings. Ishan Kishan looked good as well. And India really made a mess of the English bowling, with the exception of David Willey. Chris Jordan was struggling right at the end with the dew on the ball, and India got the runs right near the end. So, pretty good hit out for both of those sides, and it really did feel, watching it, as though it was the two leading teams in the tournament, which is what everyone kind of thinks. In the other games, West Indies 7 for 130, and that wasn't enough. And Pakistan pretty much cruised to that victory. Babar Azam 50 and Fakhar Zaman 46 not out from just 24. So Kyron Pollard made 23 from 10, and he batted at number 7. I think that maybe he needs to go up the order. Now, Chris Gale, 20 off 30. Wonder if Curtly Ambrose will have any comments about that innings. And in the final warm-up game, South Africa beat Afghanistan. What did you make of that one?
Look, to be honest, I think there's not a whole lot to read into this on a South African front. And I say that with the greatest respect to the Afghan team that's been put out here, because there's been such a huge turnover in players in what they've picked for the World Cup. Don't want to harp on too much about the political issues that surround Afghanistan and Afghanistan cricket, but you can tell that has forced huge change into this team. This is essentially almost a bit of a dad's army outfit especially some of the elder statesmen outside of guys like Rashid Khan and Mujib, and maybe even Hazratullah Zerzai and Ramanullah Gurbaz. It's almost an old school reunion for Afghanistan. And to be honest, it's not the greatest prep for South Africa, because you'd want to play against a side that should be pulling up roots during the tournament. I've got to say, for South Africa, they would have wanted a few more lessons to be taken out of this. And I think, if anything, there's just been a few more questions thrown around. Aiden Markram made runs, and for South Africa, he's been a pretty polarizing player in the sense of where does he fit in the South African team. Quinton de Kock is by far and away the best player in that top order, and Bavoom is leading the side. So that's two guys that definitely get picked in the team. But then when you look down between Rassie van der Dussen, Heinrich Klaassen, David Miller, Dwayne Pretorius, Bjorn Fortune, Via Mulder, I just don't know how that South African team is constructed. Whether or not Australia can capitalise on that being in their group, I'm not too sure. But yeah, I think the short answer to the question is I wouldn't take a whole lot out of this result. Maybe in terms of how people adjusted to facing the likes of the Afghan spin, but Rashid Khan didn't bowl. So look, yeah, not going to take a whole lot out of that one. And I've got to say that, yeah, South Africa would probably be disappointed coming out of that, thinking that, yeah, they probably haven't learned a lot before the tournament proper.
Yeah, to score 5 for 145 against Afghanistan with, as you say, Rashid Khan not bowling a ball, it's not all that impressive. I mean, they ultimately did get the win by 41 runs, with Afghanistan finishing 8 for 104. The cynics would say, well, Australia and South Africa are kind of playing for pride when they start their tournament because neither of them have a chance of going through. I don't agree with that. I think that obviously both sides are not as highly fancied as they have often been throughout World Cups in the past, but I still wouldn't put it past either or both of them surprising. I thought back to the Aussies, I think the one thing that was very impressive, they did look exceptionally sharp in the field, by far the sharpest of all the sides I've seen in this tournament. Steve Smith in particular looked very, very good. He looked pretty good when he was batting as well. Very frustrated when he got out playing a lap sweep. Daniel, we've run out of time. Great to chat to you today. Thanks for bearing with me with all my technical issues. Hope everyone enjoyed Cricket Daily today, and tune in again tomorrow because there's an absolute plethora of games of cricket going on.